Good morning and welcome to the Basin Energy Investor webinar. I'm Chloe Hayes from JMM Investor and Media Relations, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Pete Moorhouse, Managing Director of Basin Energy. This morning, Pete will be sharing an update on Basin's recent announcements that the company has entered into a binding agreement to acquire Neodiz Limited, which gives Basin the largest prospective uranium and rare earths land holding in Queensland. It's an exciting acquisition that brings multiple drill targets across 3 different geological settings. And before we get started today, just a quick reminder, if you'd like to ask any questions throughout today's webinar, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Pete.
Perfect. Thank you, Chloe, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. I'll pull my presentation up. So I'm going to be using a version of the presentation which was lodged with the ASX yesterday. It is modified for the purposes of this webinar. We're going to be focusing on the Neodiz acquisition, but if you'd like to delve into any of the points we talk on today, please reach out to Chloe or myself and we'll arrange a one-to-one and run through those. For the disclaimer, please review the presentation which was released on the ASX. Just briefly, we're going to focus on our Northwest Queensland discussion this morning. Basin does acknowledge that overnight there was some very exciting news come out of the Nordic regions, with Sweden confirming that they will be changing their ban on the uranium mining policy, and this will be occurring in Q1 or January next year. So we eagerly await to see the next steps for that. Our Athabasca Basin projects, this is in the heart of the uranium land. We are looking actively for partners on 2 of those and retaining the Geeky project. The focus for the next few months is very much in Australia. Briefly, our board, we're an exploration company. I'm Brisbane-based, have been for a long time, as is Odile. Our team is quite varied with technical and corporate backgrounds in the uranium and exploration sector. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if you'd like to discuss more. Okay, into the fun bit, Queensland uranium and rare earths. As Chloe mentioned, Basin has agreed to acquire 100% of Neodiz. So looking at the map on the right-hand side of your screen, we've got the Basin Energy or the Neodiz tenements in dark blue. These projects are located just outside of Mount Isa, so from an infrastructure perspective, they are exceptionally good. We have close access to railways, power, roads, and infrastructure from the town. We're surrounded by some pretty exciting players, both the big guys such as Rio, Glencore and BHP and Anglo, but also very significant to our story, Red Metals adjacent to us who have had the Sibella discovery and Paladin Energy with their Valhalla deposit to the north. This is a big land holding. We're talking almost 6,000 square k's of strategic ground here, and we believe they're prospective for a series of opportunities which we'll touch on in a minute. Critically to us, we have district scale opportunity which are accessible through low cost exploration. We're talking air core and RC drilling, and we'll discuss how we intend to do that in a moment. Into the technical side a little bit. We've got 3 district scale opportunities for both uranium and rare earths. We're going to start looking at sediment opportunities first of all. If you look at the first map, the red outline is the Sibella granite. So this is, Sibella batholith, which is a series of granites, a big body striking north-south to the eastern side of our project area. Now this, if you like, is the engine room or the powerhouse for all of the opportunities that we're going to discuss, and really the source for the metals that we're exploring for. The Barclay tablelands, which is the sediments deposited to the west of that granite, are shown on the map here. We believe that the Barclay tablelands sediments are sourced from the Sibella, and part of the model is potential for minerals from the Sibella to be sitting in the tablelands. A very quick, brief cross-section, sort of schematically showing that model, a granitic unit with variable enrichment in uranium and rare earths, shedding sediments into the tablelands to the west, where we believe there's potential for some significant occurrences. Now, from my perspective, I first became interested in this. So I was exploring for uranium in Northwest Queensland back in the mid-2000s, 2006, 7, 8. We were looking for opportunities around for uranium, and at the time the Summit Resources guys were very active with work around Valhalla and work around shear hosted mineralization, and there's some significant deposits. To the top end of your map, it's just off here, but the Valhalla project is there, and there's a lot of evidence for the uranium in the Valhalla being sourced from this granitic body. Now, at the time, the Summit Resources guys started to think about this as well and said, is there potential that those sediments which are sitting to the west, which we keep talking about, the Barkly Tablelands, is the potential for a South Australia analogy whereby the uranium in the partially enriched zones of this granite is being transported into the tablelands and being deposited in potential roll front networks, roll front systems. The Summit guys started this, and they went and flew some EM and mapped a series of stacked, extensive paleo-channel networks, and then they did some target ranking. However, these never got drill tested. If we consider the timing of this, obviously funding was difficult for uranium exploration, and Summit was ultimately purchased by Paladin, and the projects were left alone. There is a little bit of historic drilling, nothing for uranium in there, and nothing for rare earths in there that we can see, for phosphate and for base metals, but critically there is some evidence, a couple of references in those logs to oxidization fronts or to roll fronts. So we believe that that system is active. Great opportunity. I draw your attention to scale again. It's a big system, this. It's a big target, big opportunity, district scale potential. Okay, so thinking about those Summit days, let's fast forward to 15 years and look at what Red Metal had achieved. So Red Metal went out to look for rare earths in the granite themselves, and they found the Sabella discovery, which is looking to be an extremely promising development for Northwest Queensland and for Northwest Queensland's future. The Neodis guys had the model that if the Summit guys were correct and the sediment deposition to the west was real, could there be potential for remobilization of those rare earths off to the west into the sediments as well? They went and did some soil sampling, and they went and looked at some regional data, and lo and behold, in those sediments off to the west, we have some seriously anomalous rare earths with the highest values sitting directly west of the Sabella discovery. So again, this is evidence that the metals that we're seeing in that granitic unit are shifting off into the tablelands. Now, as you can see from this map, a series of samples just in the wind-blown sands, or the sands are on the top of the surface at running over 600 ppm. This is regionally significant anomaly, guys. Now, we believe that there is potential here for both sediment-hosted or potentially sand-hosted rare earths. But if we look at the work that Summit did, thinking about those paleo channels, which all appear to be being fed from the Sabella granite, and we look at a depth slice of about 20 to 30 meters, and we see a laterally extensive conductive body. It looks about 12 meters thick. Considering the source sediments for this package is the Sabella, it's quite possible that this is a clay pan or a clay unit. Is that clay a suitable trap for the significant timescale of rare earths being shipped in from the Sabella? And if so, this is a big target, and one which is really amenable to some low-cost drilling. The Neodis guys put in place a grant with the Queensland government to go and assess the potential for this, and we'll be conducting that as soon as possible. So that's from some basic air core drilling. So that's our sediment package, and to get excited about a district scale sediment bowl like this is look, there's a lot of opportunity here. I'm going to touch on hard rock now. We'll start off with the more advanced hard rock opportunity, which we're saying is analogous to the red metal Sabella deposit, and then we'll touch on the traditional Valhalla style shear hosted targets. Back to why this granite is so exciting. It's big. It's got some really good rare earth enrichment. So this is the regional data set for rock chips, and you're seeing some of those values quite often above 1,000 ppm sitting at surface. So it is largely enriched in rare earths. The Neodis guys went and conducted some first pass. We want to prove a concept here. And they took a trailer-mounted auger rig down existing farm tracks and access roads and fence lines and did a proof of concept study. They drilled a series of holes. I want to point out that these are very shallow. A lot of these are only a couple of meters deep. I think the deepest on this is about 14, 15 meters. And they identified 3 regions with some pretty interesting anomalism. Those being 3 ways, 8 Mile, and the one that we're going to have our initial focus on and talk about today is Newman's. So Newman's had 4 pretty good hits, all of which were still anomalous to the end of the hole. So we're seeing with hole 20, for example, 5 meters at just under 2,000 ppm total rare earths to the end of that sample point. Why is that so significant? If we look at the red metal discovery, now this was made using, I was watching one of Rob's technical talks, I think with GeoHug, This was made using a Geoscience Australia a seismic line, which had had end-of-hole samples done. And if we look at the tenor of the similar levels for total rare earths or for rare earth oxides sitting in the base of those holes in the same depths, and we compare that to what we have, it's a pretty compelling analogy. From Red Metal's perspective, they followed that up with some deeper drilling. They went and did 120-meter RC holes directly underneath that, and that was the result of the Sibella discovery. So from Basin's perspective, let's go and do that. Let's go and put some RC holes in as a first pass and see if there's not only Red Metal's fantastic discovery, is there opportunity for more of these styles of system in this granitic batholith? And if so, let's assess the broader land holding that we have here. Further work that Red Metal did was pretty all credit to the guys. They did some great test work, and I think this is the key point here, is that they've managed to prove, conceptually anyway, that there is an efficient way to process this using a relatively weak acid, relatively low acid consumption, and getting some reasonably good recoveries. And that was really the turning point from them, from the perspective of market recognition, that this discovery has got legs. And there's learnings from this that we can take and then look at for when we're doing our hard rock work, but also potential implications on our sediment work as well. And then finally, the Valhalla-style shear-hosted targets. What, again, back to the great work that Neodis had done, Neodis guys took the radiometric data and did some processing filters on that to try and highlight the alteration styles that are pretty specific to Valhalla. And what I point out is how well those shear-hosted deposits known in the region stick out, and they're shown at the top right-hand side of your screen here. These are all hosted in a rock unit called the Cromwell metabasalt, and they are a shear, so a fault-hosted type system. What we see is a Cromwell metabasalt wrapping around the Sibella granite. Now, the Sibella granite likely the uranium source for those deposits, and we see cross-cutting radiometric anomalies matching the same signatures of Valhalla, but directly adjacent to the source rock. From our perspective, let's go and do the basics first. Let's go rock chip these. Let's go map them. However, first pass from a set of radiometric data to go and look at, this is quite exciting. So in summary, what can Basin expect over the next 6 or so months? We've got district scale opportunities for some large sediment hosted potential. First of all, from a clay hosted or sand hosted rare earth out in the Barclay Tablelands. We've got the potential to investigate for paleochannel roll front uranium, again in the Tablelands. Both of those can be achieved with basic cheap drilling. And then we have the opportunity to test a red metal Sibella anomaly by RC drilling directly underneath Newmans and doing some good old geology at the Valhalla prospect. At the same time as the acquisition, we conducted a placement. We raised 1.25 million at market, which represented about 9% premium to the 20-day VWAP. This means, considering at the end of last quarter we still had $1 million in the bank, we will be funded to be able to conduct all of those programs for the first pass, and each of which has the potential, we believe, for some exciting news flow. The deal structure, we've tried to structure this to provide both reward if the project succeeds, but also minimal dilution up front with 18.5 million shares issued for the acquisition and a series of back-end rights if we have some big success. So that's a summary. This was a pre-cap structure, but if you'd like to know more, then I encourage you to reach out. And if anyone has any immediate questions, please put them out there.
Great. Let's jump into some questions. So Pete, considering some of the targets are prospective for uranium, could you talk a bit about the broader uranium landscape in Queensland?
Yeah, sure. That's a good opening question. As you know, I've been working based out of Queensland for a long time and worked on various projects. I guess the big shift for us recently up here is the broader discussions for uranium mining and power generation that we've had in Australia, but also the great work that the likes of Laramide have been doing up on the Westmoreland deposit. They've added some significant upside to that over the last couple of years. And I guess this can be underpinned, and the credibility of this can be underpinned by the investment that we're seeing from Boss Resources. I believe they're pushing 20% ownership now, which was announced over the last few months. Really bringing a spotlight back into Queensland as a potential powerhouse for uranium as we look at ways of reinvigorating northwest Queensland's economy. It's certainly a compelling story and a compelling opportunity.
Great. And moving on to Sweden. So, Sweden is moving to change its stance on uranium mining with new legislation set to come into effect on January 1st, 2026. How do you see this shift impacting Basin's activities and prospects in Sweden?
Yeah, so look, I mean that's been talked about for quite a while, but there was a press conference last night by the Swedish government that confirmed that news, which is really exciting for us. So Basin took a first mover opportunity in the Nordic regions, and so far our most exciting results have been in the northern Sweden region. There we've been some historic drilling, which has hit some reasonably good grades, but some extensive rock chipping as well, which starting to demonstrate the size and opportunity in that part of the world. We're returning surface samples in excess of 5% uranium. Now, we had considered this region to be prospective for some other commodities as well, but we haven't seen as exciting results in the other commodities as perhaps we would have hoped for. So the priority has to be uranium now. So from our perspective now, the good news from the government is fantastic. Let's let them get that finalised, and then let's work out the best way to release value. But in the meantime, setting up for permitting and setting up for low cost but high impact work when the time is right. Sorry, high impact from a returns point of view, not from a disturbance point of view.
Yes, of course. And Pete, with Paladin and Red Metals active in the same district in Queensland, how do you see Basin differentiating itself and adding value alongside those peers?
Yeah, sure. So the Paladin guys, that's not quite right. The Paladin guys haven't been active on the Valhalla projects, but they have those assets as a long-term strategic position. Now, Red Metal, as I mentioned in the presentation, the work and the discovery and the advancement of that project has been very, very good and very positive, and we certainly are going to be looking at their results and looking at their work to date. Our first point of differentiation is looking at the potential for those sediment-hosted opportunities and the scale that that could bring, and then complementing what the guys have done with the hard rock potential. So I see ways of being different, but ways of being similar, and I think there's certainly some ways to release some value there.
Great. And Pete, you've mentioned both strong investor backing and government support. Can you talk us through how that helps de-risk your work program over the next 6 months?
Certainly. Well, strong investor, we were very oversubscribed at the placement. We had some fantastic support both from the vendor groups and their associates, but also from some of our existing major holders or the sophisticated groups and funds on the board there, on the register. So that provides us with the confidence to be able to go and really give this a good shake and a good hit. From a Queensland government perspective, there's certainly an incentivisation to develop a critical minerals industry in northwest Queensland, and I think that's fair to say that the issuance of the grant, the CEI grant to the Neotis guys for exploring that clay-hosted or sediment-hosted rare earth potential is a real reflection of that. I'm biased. I mean, I classify myself as a Queenslander despite the accent, but this is a fantastic state to operate in and a fantastic department and government to work with. So we intend to embrace that and move forwards.
Great. And just going back to the Red Metals Cybella discovery, are there any insights or lessons that you'll be drawing on for your own exploration plans for Basin?
I've probably talked too much about their discovery already, to be honest with you. But certainly, as I pointed out in the presentation, the analogies between the geochemistry and the lithological units between what the Neotis guys did and what the Red Metals guys did pre-discovery is very real. And then simple RC drilling to move that forward. But I think critically is understanding that the value release for them was through demonstrating a credible way to processing. So ensuring that if we do manage to find something similar or similar tenor of anomalism or mineralization, then let's ensure that we activate the same checks that the processing is amenable to a sensible pathway forwards before we get too carried away. And as you saw from their perspective, that realization came after that. So.
Great. And Pete, beyond the upcoming drilling, what are some of the key milestones investors should keep an eye out over the next 6 months?
Hey, is that not enough? No, look, obviously there's a lot of drilling happening there, or a lot of maiden drilling on a variety of projects, a variety of opportunities in the Queensland project there. I also mentioned the rock chips in the first pass for looking at Valhalla. We've already touched on the political shifts up in Scandinavia, in the Nordic regions, especially in Sweden. So getting that passed through. And then, as I also mentioned, potentially looking at ways of releasing value from the non-core Athabasca assets. So from our perspective, the Geeky project, we've done a bit of work on that. We've had some, what we believe, a technical success and a very, we're in the right address, we believe, and we want to safeguard that. But looking for ways for releasing value on the North Millennium and Marshall projects will be another potential catalyst for the company. Lots going on. There's no shortage.
Of course. And finally, Pete, so how should shareholders think about Basin's long-term strategy? Is the aim to build a multi-jurisdiction exploration company, or do you plan to focus down on a flagship assets once drill results come in?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It really is. It's hard to answer until you move one of those projects forwards quite clearly. We believe that we can add value through broadly what we've just discussed by taking that strategy and adding, focusing at the moment on the Queensland assets. We know that we've got some low cost movement that we can do there, which perhaps represents the position we're in. There's a bit of cash in the bank, but we can generate some good, solid exploration happening there. We don't intend to divest the Geeky project in the short term. That we believe has some intrinsic value, and there's no need to get rid of it. It's not costing us money to hold it. We've spent enough money to keep it in good standing for several years now. So from a multi-jurisdictional point of view, back to your question, yes, we intend to keep that. And then with Scandinavia, this is an emerging district which is going to have some serious spotlight shined on it once that policy has changed, once some of our peers are going active again, and then we intend to let that add value to the company. So yes, we do intend to be multi-jurisdictional, but we are aware of our capabilities and our depth, and we'll be focusing on what we can add value to immediately, which is the Queensland assets straight away.
Great, exciting times ahead.
I think so.
Well, Pete, that looks like it's all we have time for today. Thank you everyone for joining in to the webinar today. Should we have missed any of your questions, please feel free to reach out via the contact details at the bottom of our ASX announcements, and we look forward to hosting you again.
Perfect. Thank you so much for putting this on, Chloe, and thank you to everyone who attended.